Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This time we have a lecture for the lymphatic system for the pre-med students for the spring session to 2020. This is the learning objective for the lecture. At the end of the session, the students will be able to describe lymph and lymphatic system, identify the components of lymphatic system, means how it is composed of, describe the structures of the lymphatic systems, and its relation with cardiovascular system. So what's the relation between this system and the cardiovascular system, because sometimes we don't differentiate between these two, so this will be highlighted here. Describe the lymphatic circulation and lymphatic vessels, so how the lymph circulate in the body, that is another objective. Describe the lymphatic drainage of the different regions of the body, means regions. Usually in the anatomy we have got 5 regions: head and neck, thorax, abdomen, upper limb, lower limb, and pelvis, perineum. So how the things are draining from there. Then differentiate among different lymphoid organs: diffuse lymphocytes, lymph nodules, lymph nodes, tonsils, thymus, spleen. So we will study inshallah one by one. Now this is the slide that is mentioning about the lymphatic system. The basic concept of the lymphatic system is just like as mentioned by Marcellus Speck regarding the lymphatic system, that it acts like a Cinderella. And if in the childhood you have studied this story, then you can well compare the sisters and the Cinderella herself. So their system make a mess and Cinderella has to clean it. Similarly, the circulatory system make a mess in the tissues and the lymphatic system has to clean the mess. This Chinese excessive term that underlines the whole health. So that is actually the cleaning system of the body. If the movement of the lymph stopped entirely, one would die in a matter of hours. Usually, for the general information, that daily within the tissue there is almost 1 to 2 liters of extra fluid that accumulate within the tissues during the uh, nutritional exchange between the capillaries uh, at the two ends, arteries and the veins, right? So when this capillary exchange of materials goes on, so 10% is usually left over in the tissue. So that comprises almost 1 to 2 liters in 24 hours. That should be cleaned from the tissue, otherwise tissue will swell. Okay, this is the slide discussing about the lymph, how it forms and how it works. So the arterial system, the arterial blood slows down as it moves to the capillaries for the nutritional exchange. What happens actually when the blood is flowing at the arterial end and enters into the tissue? Inside the tissue, the arteries divides and form the capillaries, and capillaries rejoin together to form the venule, right? And these capillaries inside the tissue, they make the exchange of nutrition and gases, all these things, right? So from the arterial end, the blood that enters through diffusion into the tissue, out of that 100%, 90% return back at the venular end. And you know that how this exchange takes place based on two physiological principles, like oncotic pressure that you got as the osmotic pressure and the hydrostatic pressure. So on the venular end, the hydrostatic pressure is low and the oncotic pressure is high. So due to osmotic uh, uh, pressure, the plasma that had went out of that 100%, 90% came back again at the venular end, because in the venular end, inside the venule, the protein is more, water is less, so it makes more osmotic pressure develop over there, so it suck most of the plasma back again. So 90% is sucked back at the venular end. But what happens in this going out of the plasma and coming back 90%, that 10% remains inside the tissue. So they fail to return back at the venular end. So at every circulation, every heartbeat, what happens? The blood that comes into the capillaries, 10% is spilled over or remains over, right? So when this condition keeps on going, so almost in 24 hours, 1 to 2 liters of fluid accumulates within the tissue. That makes that accumulated 10%. So that has to be removed out. So here in the slide, uh, this allows plasma to leave the capillaries and flow into the tissues where it becomes tissue fluid, means the interstitial fluid. Then this fluid is called as the interstitial fluid, means actually the space between the two cells. That area is called as the interstitial space, and there are fluids over there. So when this extra 10%, they accumulate in that interstitium, and that fluid actually then swell the tissue till it is not removed. So at every circulation, this lymphatic system, so this interstitium becomes increased in the tissue due to this accumulation. Exchange of nutrients and waste occurs between the cells and the fluid. After this task is complete, 90% of this fluid carrying waste products returns to the circulatory system as venous blood, and the remaining 10% of the fluid left behind is called as the lymph when it enters into the lymph capillaries. So when it enters, that 10%, when it enters into the lymphatic capillaries, inside the lymphatic capillaries, they are called lymph. But when they are outside in the interstitium, they are called as interstitial fluid. Now, regarding the functions of the lymphatic system, there are 4 basic functions of the lymphatic system. The first function relates to the maintenance of pressure and volume of the extracellular fluid. Extracellular fluid, here it means the interstitial fluid of the tissue, and the pressure means the same. When the volume is increased, the pressure is increased. Number 2 functions, the second function is the removal of large molecules, large molecular weight substances or proteins which cannot be absorbed by the blood capillaries. So sometimes in the tissue, in the interstitium, cells die, and some of the components of the cell will also come out in the interstitium, and that have to be removed. But the capillaries, they don't actually carry those dead materials through the capillaries suction process. So that is all again removed. This is the responsibility of the lymphatic system to do this thing. Another function is immunity. Lymphatic system, as it is called lymphatic system, so we come to know that there are some immunity aspect of this system. Lymph nodes, other lymphatic organs, filter the lymph to remove invading microorganisms and other foreign particles. Because in the tissue, if you have observed that if there is any injury to the tissue, foreign particle, bacteria or foreign antigens, they also enter into the tissue because the skin is in size broken, so everything can go inside the body. So those things, they are also drained out by the lymphatic system. So that's why this system is again very important to remove the either the microorganism or the foreign particle. Then the fourth function is the absorption of fats and fat soluble vitamins from the digestive system. This lymphatic system has a very wonderful lacteal system inside the villi of the small intestine that actually absorbs the fatty material from the digestive system. What you eat, the fat is absorbed through those lacteals that are the part of the lymphatic circulatory system. So that fat is then gone into your circulation later on. Okay, this is the slide that is dependent on the different composition of the lymphatic system. We feel that the lymphatic system is only one system with the lymph nodes and the vessels, but actually it is comprising of two parts. It is depending on two parts. So one is the vascular part. In the vessel, the lymphatic vessels are there, and the lymph is running in that, and that is called the vascular circulatory system of the lymphatic part of the lymphatic system. And there is another part of the lymphatic system that comprises of only the lymphocytes, either in aggregation or is present inside any tissue, or forms an organ, the lymphoid organ, like thymus and spleen, or like this. So we have two things. One, the lymphatic system comprising of the lymph that is running in the vessels, and another part of the same system, lymphatic system, that contains the lymphoid cells, lymphatic cells, aggregation, or inside the tissue, or forming an organ, right? That is not running in the vessel actually. So there are two different parts. So here the components of the lymphatic system, it discuss about the lymph that is running inside the vessel, that we have already discussed. Then lymphatic capillaries that suck in those 10% of fluid that remains inside the tissue. Then when come inside the capillaries, uh, the lymph, it runs in the vessels. So the vessels, they may be afferent and efferent. Uh, on the way of the vessels, there comes lymph nodes. So lymph nodes, they act like a railway station. So a rain, that is the lymph that is running, it comes to the station where it the passenger step down and the new passenger come in, and there is some exchange occur there, and then the train again, it exit from the station and go further ahead, then it further find another station. So there are several stations for the same train. Similarly, in the lymph acts like a train, and that is running in the vessels. Vessels are the trail of the two parallel trails of the train on which the train runs, right? So those are the vessels. So on running these lymph inside the vessels, they go to the lymph nodes, and from the lymph nodes there another track on which the lymph goes out. So those are called as afferent and efferent for one station. So when the vessel actually it goes on its way to the lymph node, so from the exit of the lymph node, the vessels, they are called afferent vessels. So afferent vessels and efferent vessels. So afferent vessels and efferent vessels. Then comes the lymphatic ducts. These efferent vessels, they join later on at the end of each region, because one region is drained by these lymph vessels, and on its way the lymph nodes are there, right? And from that region, the lymph with the lymph vessels, as they move towards the proximal end of the regions, just like in the upper limb and lower limb, so when they move towards the center point of the body, the central median plane of the body, they start to converge, means they start to unite together. So vessels, they unite together as they approach close to the proximal end of the region. So just like in the upper limb, if we have got the distal end, the fingers, the vessels from the fingers and then moves to the forearm and then moves to the arm, they start to merge together, unite together. And when they come out at the proximal end of the upper limb, they form some big vessels. And those big vessels, they may be called as, initially as lymphatic ducts. So the ultimate big size vessel is called lymphatic duct, the ultimate. So there are two those ultimate lymphatic vessels. On the right side it is called right lymphatic duct, and on the left side it's called thoracic duct. So here we have the thoracic duct visible here, and this is the right lymphatic duct. So right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct. When we say thoracic duct, it means it is the alternative name for the left lymphatic duct. Right lymphatic duct and this thoracic duct or left lymphatic duct. Both of them, they ultimately drain into the veins. Then comes the lymphatic cells. Lymphatic cells like B cells and T cells. So lymph, that is the fluid. So inside the fluid, uh, while that fluid is running uh, among the lymph nodes, from the lymph nodes at the stations, those stations contain the lymphatic cells. Those are called as lymphocytes, B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Every lymph node contains B and T types of lymphocytes inside the lymph nodes, right? So when the lymph enter into the lymph node, that lymph either activate or suppress the lymphocytes and then moves on. It exit from the lymph node. So those two types of lymphatic cells, they are B and T cells, lymphocytes. Lymphatic nodules, nodule and nodules. These two, nodule is smaller than nodes, right? So lymph nodes, they are the part of, just like here you can see, these are the lymph nodes, lymphatic vessel, and on a way there are stations. So these are acting like stations called as lymph nodes, but these are palpable, means normally they are not palpable, but when they are enlarged, swelled due to some antigen antibody reaction, their size increases and then they become palpable. Palpable means they are observable by touching. You can feel that there is a rounded node is here, just like in the sore throat. If you have sore throat, sore infection, you will find the palpable lymph nodes below your chin, below your mandible, on your neck. But normally you cannot find it because in the infection, in the nodes, B and T lymphocytes, they are increasing their number to develop immunity, means cellular immunity or humoral immunity to kill the bacteria that is infecting the throat. So these are actually the lymph nodes, normally non-palpable, but at the time of infection in the region, that regional lymph nodes, they are swelled. Regional lymph nodes are also swelled in the regional cancer. So cancerous cells in the tissue, in the interstitium, they also run through the lymphatics. So when they reach the station, the lymph nodes, they activate, multiply their cells, and they increase in size, they become palpable. So lymph nodes are these lymph nodes. So these are the lymph nodes and these are the vessels. So vessels, they open into the lymph nodes, from one lymph node to another lymph node. So there are several lymph nodes. So this is the right side. So this one is the right lymphatic duct ultimately, and this one is the left side. So this left side is a major one. So it is called as thoracic duct. Sometimes it is called as long thoracic duct. So thoracic duct is on the left side. So right sided drainage is done by right lymphatic duct, and left sided drainage, it is a big drainage because it also includes the lower limb, both the left half, and that is the thoracic duct. So thoracic duct drains the left side, usually the major part, and the right side, it is drained by the right lymphatic duct. Now this is the slide that mentioned about the lymphatic circulation, means how the lymph is running and circulating in the body within the lymphatic vascular system. I just added vascular here just to show you that this is a vascular system, the lymph that is running and flowing inside the vascular system. So this is one part of the lymphatic system, that is the lymphatic vascular circulation. So here is the capillaries, arteries and the veins. The plasma part goes into the tissue and 90% is reabsorbed here, but the 10% remain inside the tissue. So that 10% is sucked in by the capillaries, the lymph capillaries. So these capillaries, they unite and they form the lymph vessels, and these are the uh, lymph vessels, showing here some valves. So valve is one of the feature of the lymphatic vessels. Then this one big structure, this is the lymph node, and the vessels that are entering into this lymph node, these vessels are called afferents, and the vessels that are exiting from the lymph node, those are called as efferent vessels. And these goes on station to station, lymph node to lymph node, and ultimately they form the lymph trunk first, and these trunks, they all join together to form a single lymph duct. And that lymph single lymphatic duct, here they are showing the right side, so this is the right lymphatic duct that ultimately drain into the veins. Now come to the point here. If we go, this is the interstitial fluid, and then the lymphatics, and the lymphatics then goes to the afferent lymphatic vessels, then it becomes the lymphatic nodes, then goes to the efferent lymphatic vessels, and several efferents, they join to form the trunk first, and then several trunks, they join together to form the duct, and the ducts ultimately drain into the venous system. Because if you see here, this is the vein, so ultimately all the 10% that was cleaned by this lymphatic system, they were circulating and ultimately drain into the veins. Coming to the next slide. In the next slide we have, they are just showing you how the things they work. Arteries, these are the capillaries, veins, and to the heart. So here this is the heart, and there is the arterial systemic circulation with the capillaries, and this is the vein, and then this is the pulmonary circulation, and this is the pulmonary vein coming back to the left atrium. Now where these two capillaries, in the pulmonary and in the tissues, right? The 10% that is left over, they are drained by this these are lymph nodes, so the lymphatic vessels, and ultimately both the right side and the left side, the pulmonary and the systemic, they drain into the veins. Now here we have got different uh, lymphatic capillaries, and then we have got capillaries, from the capillaries lymphatic vessels, from the lymphatic vessels afferent, uh, this is the afferent lymphatic vessel going to the lymph node, and the exiting one, they are efferent lymphatic vessels, they ultimately form the trunks, they join together, efferent ones, they form the trunk, and the trunk, they form the trunks form the lymphatic ducts, and the lymphatic ducts ultimately they drain into the veins, and that is all over. So it goes on like this. Now, why is this information on lymphatic drainage so important? Damage to the lymphatic disturbs the flow of lymph. Any pathway in between the capillaries, vessels, lymph nodes, trunk, ducts, any obstruction, any damage, what will happen? Failure to collect that extra 10% that is there in the tissue, and what will happen? The tissue will start to swell, edema. So in the lymphatic system, or lymph nodes has been removed, obstructed, or destroyed of lymph cannot drain normally from the affected area. This leads to accumulation of the lymph and causes edema, and if the lymph accumulates and causes the swelling, that condition is called lymphedema. And you can see this is what lymphedema, one leg is not normal still, but this one, the primary one, the old one, similarly this is the same, there is a buttock, and there is a normal leg, and there is the second leg in which the lymphatic system is blocked by some infection, parasitic infection, and the condition called as elephantiasis. So this leg become elephant-like. Similarly, in the breast, sometimes if the lymphatic duct are blocked, the breasts they swell and they become high weighted. Similarly, again, there is the male side and there is the penis and there is the scrotum. So sometimes if there is some block in the scrotal drainage, the scrotum swell like a balloon and become very much enlarged. Then consequences of lymphatic obstruction. You can see that these are the pictures showing different swellings, and all these swellings, the primary cause is block in the lymphatic duct. So this is the right hand, normal old person, and this is the swelled one. Similarly, this is another swelled arm, and here normal leg, and this is the swelled leg. The tissue keeps on accumulating 10% of fluid, and that fluid is not drained. So when it is not drained, it swelled, and it's swelled chronic disease. Same here, same here. Any obstruction drainage due to disease or removal of destruction of the lymphatic during surgery results in accumulation of lymphatic leading to the swelling called lymphedema. During surgery means if any surgery, if that's why this anatomy becomes a primary role in the best surgeries, that post-surgical complication, how minimal is the post-surgical. So what you are doing, what you are touching the body, what structure you are touching, you should know what you are cutting and what you are separating. So this is very, very important. The next slide, components of the lymphatic system. Lymph, the extracellular fluid. Now this is the composition of the lymph, extracellular fluid tissue. Once it is entered into the lymph capillaries, it is called lymph. Then it is similar in composition as plasma, because it is the 10% of the plasma that was left over, but it is mixed up with the maybe high molecular weight proteins that failed to go back into the venular part through the process of diffusion. So they are sucked up here because there's big opening here. Similarly, lymph formation depends on tissue fluid formation. So the lymph will actually, its composition will depend on the composition of the tissue. Status of the tissue means it is infected, so it may contain bacteria, virus or anything, or if it is necrose means dead, so it may contain some dead cells, dead particles of the cell portion. And then come to the capillaries. In the capillaries, can you see this the features of the capillaries? I will show you this circle, this green color structure, this green color duct. This is the blind duct. Blind means that is closed, it is not open, it is not continuous with any vein like structures. Artery, its capillaries, it is continuous with the veins, just like this artery, its lumen is continuous with the vein, venous capillary, right? Arterial capillary, venous capillary, they are continuous, but this lymph duct don't continue with any other structure, so they are called blind-ended. First feature, the blind-ended. Second is this circle. In the circle you can see that these, which type of cell is this? Flat cells, we call them as squamous cells. So just like the capillary endothelial cells, these cells are also the squamous cells. So squamous cells, but what is the feature? They are not attached end to end, but they are attached overlapping to each other. Can you see this overlapping? And this overlapping makes this space very easy for the extracellular fluid, interstitial fluid, to enter through this overlapping, right? So that's the reason why and how the fluid extracellular, they enter, they leaked inside, and inside there is a negative pressure. So negative pressure we will discuss. So lymphatic capillaries are blind-ended. First thing, capillaries located next to the capillaries in the tissue. Second point, they are lined by a single layer of overlapping endothelial cells, which act as one-way valve, allowing interstitial fluid to flow in but not out. So here this arrow is indicating the fluids are coming into or inside the duct due to negative pressure, and it sucks in the negative pressure. It sucks the thing inside where there is a high negative pressure. So when it is inside, they are not allowed to go back. So while going back, these two parts, they act like a valve, so they stick together. So once the fluid is inside, they actually push the cells and they close these openings so they cannot go out. Second, more permeable than the blood capillaries. Secondly, absent from epithelia, cartilage, brain, spinal cord, and brain and bone marrow. This is very important point, because you have to memorize where these lymphatic capillaries and this lymphatic system, vascular system, is not present in the body. So in the body, in the cartilages, in the epithelium, in the brain, in the spinal cord, in the bone marrow, you may not find the lymphatic vessels. So that's why these structures are very dangerous if any fluid accumulates within inside, because there is no way to get them out. So so this is very important. Lymphatic vessels. Features of the lymphatic vessels, like the vessels of the arteries and veins, these lymphatic vessels, they are also consisting of three layers: tunica intima, the innermost; media, the middle one; and the externa. So those are called as tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica externa. Those are similar but thinner than the veins and the arteries. Then there are more numerous valves than in veins. Veins, only the major veins, the big veins, contains valves. The smaller veins, they don't contain the valves. And here in the lymphatic vessels, more numerous valves are present. Means the smaller lymphatic ducts, they also contain the valves. Then the presence of lymph nodes at interval along the course. Course means pathway. So its pathway, that 10% of fluid that is running and going and ultimately drain into the veins, along that pathway there are presence of lymph nodes. So actually this black color, uh, if you see here, they want to show this green color. Can you see this green color? So green colors, these are the ducts, and where the green colors, they are ultimately draining and attached with, so those are the stations called as lymph nodes. So from one station to another station, and station. So lymph, if it contains any bacteria or foreign particles, foreign microorganism, these lymph, when go to the lymph node, because lymph node, as we already discussed, it contains T lymphocytes or B lymphocytes. So looking at the receiving the bacteria or bacterial body parts or that part, so they multiply themselves and they become swollen, they become enlarged. So wherever the infection in that region is there, the lymph node of the respective region will be inflamed. Then arrange these lymph nodes, arrange in superficial and deep sets. The superficial lymphatics run with the veins and the deep with the arteries. So he's talking about the lymphatic vessels, right? So these vessels, these green color, they are of in two layers. So one is the superficial layer and the other one is deep layer. Superficial, they runs with the superficial veins, because veins, they contains deep veins and superficial veins, and superficial veins, they run below the skin, above the muscles, below the skin. So that's why they are called superficial. So superficial veins, these are major saphenous vein is there, and these are the axillary and the basilic veins. So these veins are superficial veins. So there are two sets of vessels. Superficial vessels runs along with the veins, and if you cut these veins and go down deep inside, then you will only find the another set of vessels and the lymphatic nodes. Both contain the lymphatic nodes and the, so similarly to superficial and deep lymphatic vessels, The group of lymph nodes, they are also grouped as superficial group of lymph nodes and deep group of lymph nodes. Larger lymphatic vessels pass through the lymph nodes and merge to form the lymphatic trunk. Now, can you see these vessels? They are going to these lymph nodes, and lymph nodes ultimately exit the lymphatic vessels that exit from the lymph nodes, efferent lymphatic vessels. They join and join and join. So this is the distal end of the region and this is the proximal end of the region. So in the proximal end, ultimately they join to the bigger vessels, and those bigger vessels, they are called as lymphatic trunks. So lymphatic trunk must be here, lymphatic trunk must be here, because these are the two regions. Then here we will discuss about the right and lymphatic trunks. So these trunks, if you trace, if you trace these regions, come to this figure. In this figure, you can see the lower limb and the lymphatic vessels, right? They are merging to form a trunk, a right lumbar trunk, left lumbar trunk, and intestinal trunk. So all these trunks, they are actually draining from one region. Lower down, they join with the cisterna chyli, and cisterna chyli, it ascends up behind the posterior to the heart and ascends up, and it ultimately forms the thoracic duct. So trunks, these trunks, they ultimately form the duct. So there is the thoracic duct here, and here will be the right lymphatic duct. So come to this, right and left jugular trunk drain the head and neck region. So similarly, as we told, that these trunks, they drain the regions. So whenever the trunks are mentioned, it means that is one trunk that is coming from one region, upper limb, lower limb, head and neck, thorax, abdomen, pelvis, perineum. So those are the regions. So for each region, we have got each different trunks. One region may contain two major trunks. So right and left jugular trunk. Jugular, right jugular trunk. What is jugular? Jugular is actually internal and external jugular vein. These vessels, they run superficially with these veins. So this vein is internal jugular vein, and the external is not mentioned here. So along the jugular vein, the lymphatic duct, lymphatic nodes, lymphatic vessels, they form the ultimately the trunk. So this is the trunk that is coming from the jugular. Jugular is actually this internal jugular, it drains from the brain, all the veins from the brain. So it is coming from the head and neck region. So jugular, since it is associated with the jugular vein that drains the head and neck veins, so this jugular, right jugular trunk, and here is the left jugular trunk, right? Just like right jugular, internal jugular vein, and left internal jugular vein. Now coming to the second part, right and left subclavian trunk drain the upper limb. Now where is the subclavian? This is the subclavian vein that is coming from the limbs, upper limb. So along with the subclavian vein that drain the upper limb, the vessels, the lymphatic vessels and the lymph nodes, they join together, merge together, and ultimately form the trunk. So that trunk is called the subclavian trunk. So when the name comes subclavian trunk, it means it is draining from the limbs. So right subclavian trunk, and here there will be the left subclavian trunk because there is the left subclavian vein. Similarly then, we have got right and left bronchomediastinal trunk drains the thorax. This is the bronchomediastinal trunk as it is coming from the thoracic region. This is the bronchomediastinal region. So the ducts and the veins that are coming here is the bronchomediastinal from the right side, and this is the left side. This is not. This is the thoracic duct. Now then here, right and left lumbar trunks, abdomen, pelvis, and lower limbs. So as we discussed, lower limb, right? So these are the intestinal trunk. Right lumbar trunk is higher, this one. So lower limb plus intestinal regions, their lymph, they are all drained into the right lumbar trunk and the left lumbar trunk. So whenever the lumbar word comes, it means it is draining from the lower limbs and the intestine. Intestinal trunk drain into the intestine. So this intestinal trunk, it forms the trunk that is coming from the small intestine, and this is very important because this small intestine, the fluid that is there, uh, that also contains the fatty acids. So what fat we take in our meal, it is absorbed, and the 10% that is left over in the small intestinal part, that 10% is drained by the lacteals. uh, the lacteals are the capillaries, a specific name in the small intestine. Those lacteals, they collect the 10% that is left over, and they only usually collect the fatty acids. So the lymph that is coming from the small intestine, the intestinal trunk, that contains the fatty acids that is absorbed from the small intestine. Then from the right and left lymphatic trunks, these all trunks, the regional trunks, these trunks, just like right subclavian trunk, right jugular trunk, and this is the right bronchomediastinal trunks. So trunk, 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 all the trunks, they ultimately finally join together before they drain all their lymph into the veins. So when they join together, they form a common duct. That duct is called as the lymphatic duct. So this is the right lymphatic duct, and here uh, this is the left bronchomediastinal trunk. This is the left subclavian. This is the left jugular trunk. 1, 2, and 3. This 3. These 3, they combine together to form this thoracic duct or left thoracic duct. There is no left thoracic duct. Actually, the thoracic duct is the only name to this one, because it is understood that it is the left thoracic duct is always present on the left side. It is never, just like bronchopulmonary trunk for the arteries from the arch of aorta. Bronchopulmonary trunk, it is the first branch of the arch of aorta, and there is no left side. So whenever we write the bronchopulmonary trunk, we only write bronchopulmonary trunk, not the right bronchopulmonary trunk, because there is no left. Similarly here, thoracic duct, there is no left thoracic duct. It is wrongly written here in the picture. So thoracic duct, it is understood that it is on the left side, because for the right side, this is small one, this is the right lymphatic duct. Why is it so? We will come in the next discussion. So lymphatic ducts, right lymphatic duct. Now look at the right lymphatic duct. Right lymphatic duct formed by the union of right jugular, right subclavian, right bronchomediastinal trunk. So all these three join together to form the right lymphatic duct. Then ends by entering in venous system at the junction between the right subclavian and the internal jugular vein. Now if you see this, the drainage, the opening of this right lymphatic duct, where it is opening? It is opening here, and this is actually the victory sign where the two veins are uniting. This is the internal jugular vein, and this vein is subclavian vein. So for the right lymphatic duct, it actually opens at the merger point of the two main veins, the right jugular vein, right internal jugular vein, and the right subclavian vein. So here it is a junction between the right subclavian vein and the internal jugular vein. Here it drains, the which structure drains or open here? Right lymphatic duct. Similarly, this is the same point that is also on the left side, that the left, this thoracic duct that is formed by these three, they ultimately drain at the junction point between the left internal jugular vein and left subclavian vein. Then we have got receives the lymph from the, we are talking about this right lymphatic duct. So right lymphatic duct formed by these three trunks, right jugular subclavian, right jugular, and right bronchomediastinal. Right lymphatic duct drain into this, receives lymph from the right half of the head, neck, thorax, and upper limb. Can you see this arrow? This arrow is pointing. This arrow is pointing towards this faded light orange color area of the body. So this is showing the right half of the head, the right half of the neck, right whole upper limb, right half of the chest, and right half of the upper abdomen. This is the region from where all the limbs they are drained into the finally right lymphatic duct. So this right lymphatic duct is a smaller one comparing to the left one, because the left lymphatic duct it is called thoracic duct. So this thoracic duct is a very big area. What remaining, the left side of the head, left side of the neck, left whole upper limb, left half of the chest, left half of the whole abdomen, and for both the lower limbs, they are all drained by this very big thoracic duct. So that's why this thoracic duct is very big one. This thoracic duct ultimately come and open here. So this is the thoracic duct coming here, and this thoracic duct is actually opening directly into the vein, and to the thoracic duct opens the uh, left subclavian, left jugular, left subclavian, and left bronchomediastinal. All these three, they are opening into the thoracic duct, and thoracic duct open into the vein, and this is a very big thoracic duct. Thoracic duct is big here, and it is showing behind, passes behind the heart also. So it is coming from this thoracic duct, and this very long thoracic duct at the starting point is this cisterna chyli, that is in the abdomen. So from the abdomen there is a big sac, and into this sac this intestinal trunk, lumbar trunk, right and left, they're all opening into the cisterna chyli, that is in the abdomen below the diaphragm. And from this cisterna chyli arises the big thoracic duct. So thoracic duct opens, and this ascend up and finally come and receive these three left-sided trunks and drain into the vein. Then this is the picture of thoracic duct. Previously we have discussed the right lymphatic duct. Now we are discussing the right lymphatic duct we have discussed. Now come to the thoracic duct, very long one. This very long one is coming down. These are all thoracic duct, and from where it is arising, from this structure, that is the cisterna chyli. It is just below the diaphragm. So there are ribs here showing the thoracics, but this is a wrong impression. So this cisterna chyli is not present in the thoracic region. It is present in the abdominal region. So this is the sac-like structure, big pouch, right? And into this pouch there are openings of the right lymphatic trunk and the left lymphatic trunk and the intestinal trunk. So right thoracic trunk, it begins in front of the L2 vertebrae. So L2 lumbar region, it is in the abdomen, as a dilated sac, the cisterna chyli. So cisterna chyli is the dilated sac, which is formed by the union of the left and right lumbar trunks and intestinal trunks. So right and left lumbar trunks, and this is the intestinal trunks coming from the small intestine. Then we have got at the root of the neck, it enters into the left brachiocephalic vein. So at the root, so this thoracic duct, cisterna chyli, it gives off a duct, main duct. This is a very long thoracic duct. So this all is long thoracic duct. They are also receiving from the thoracic ducts here on the left thoracic side, but this one single, this is a thoracic duct, will ascend up and go to the root of the neck, and then make a turn and open to the it is written as enter into the left brachiocephalic vein, but actually it entered at the junction between the internal jugular vein and the left subclavian vein here. Now just before it terminates, it receives left jugular left subclavian trunk, left subclavian trunk, left bronchomediastinal trunks. It drains all parts of the body except those drained by the right lymphatic duct. So except the right lymphatic ducts that was already discussed in the previous slide, all the remaining parts are drained by the thoracic. Now come to the lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are most numerous lymphatic organs scattered throughout the body, usually in clusters. So if you see in this picture, can you see this drop-like structures? These are all lymph nodes, right? So these lymph nodes, they are scattered throughout the body. These are elongated bean shaped. They are elongated bean shaped structure arranged in superficial and deep structure, deep groups. Why superficial and deep groups? Because the superficial lymph node group, this is one group, sometimes called as axillary group of lymph node. Here in the neck it is called cervical group of lymph nodes. Here it is called inguinal group of lymph nodes. Here they are abdominal, right? Cuboidal. So there are so many groups, and all these groups, they may be superficial and deep, not everywhere but particularly in the limbs. So superficial axillary group of lymph nodes and deep axillary group of lymph nodes, superficial inguinal lymph nodes and deep inguinal lymph nodes. Why superficial? They are running above the muscles, above the deep fascia, below the skin, along with the veins, great saphenous vein, small saphenous vein. So they run superficial vessels, superficial group of lymph nodes. Below the deep fascia, inside the muscles, the arteries, along the arteries, the same lymphatic vessels they also run to drain from the deep part of the limbs and the body and drain into the deep group of lymph nodes. Lymph nodes, they cleanse the lymph and act as site of activation for B and T and B cells. So lymph nodes, what previously we have discussed, these lymph nodes, they act like stations. So what lymph is draining from the lower limb, let's suppose, and they drain into the lymph nodes, and from the afferent lymph nodes, the afferent vessel enter into the lymph node, and the efferent vessel goes to another lymph node and then to another, because these are stations. So lymph is going from one station to another station, ultimately to the bigger part, bigger vessels. So these stations, these lymph nodes, they contain which type of population? B and T cells. T for cellular immunity, B for humoral immunity. So if any infection, bacteria or something is there, they will cause activation of the lymph nodes. The cells start to multiply and increase its number. Major lymph node groups are cervical, located in the neck region, filter lymph from the head and neck. Then axillary is this one. So cervical, axillary, located in the armpit, filter lymph from the upper limb and the breast. This is very important, because in the breast cancers, when the surgery is going on, sometimes surgeon they remove the part of the breast, all the breast, or sometimes in the chemotherapy, the X-ray radiation therapy, so they damage the internal tissues, and when those damaged tissues they run in the lymph, they make the lymph nodes very palpable. Or sometimes if the lymphatic system, the duct is blocked, then you have seen the picture that very big mammary gland, the breast is hanging from the female, just because the lymphatic duct was blocked and all the fluid they remain accumulates inside the tissue. Then we have got inguinal lymph node located in the groin area, filter from the lower extremity and external genitalia. Then we have got abdominal, intestinal and mesenteric, located in the abdomen, abdominal peritoneum, filter lymph from the abdominal cavity, viscera and pelvic region. So these are very important, that which of the following drains the lymph from the pelvic region. So abdominal, intestinal, mesenteric, so all they are coming from the, so every region has got a different group of lymph. Then we have got lymphatic cells of the lymphatic systems. So this picture is very good for cisterna chyli, and there is a thoracic duct and large one, the right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct. Lymphocytes are the chief cells of the lymphatic system with supporting cells. 70% of the lymphocytes circulate in blood and lymphatic circulation, while 30% of the lymphocytes do not enter in lymphatic system and pass directly to subepithelial tissues for surveillance. Scanning means the lymphatic cells, the T and B lymphocytes, for immunity, 70% of the cells of B and T lymphocytes, they are running in the blood or in the lymphatic vascular circulation, right? While the remaining 30% of the B and T lymphocytes of the lymphatic system, they are not running or circulating in the blood or the lymphatic, but they are accumulating in the tissues, where subepithelial tissues. Below the epithelium, you will find the aggregation of T and B lymphocytes, the collection of B and lymphocytes. So what is passing above the epithelium, they can scan it, whether it is harmful to the body or it is. Mechanism of lymph flow. How the lymph flows. No pump for lymph flow. Just like you have got the circulatory system, the systemic and pulmonary circulation, and you have got the heart as a pumping machine that pumps, and that heart is acting like a pumping machine that keeps the blood circulating in the vessels. But here in the lymphatic vascular system, there is no pump like instrument. So how it runs in the vessels? So there are some mechanisms that are all physiological based. So first one is rhythmic contraction of the smooth muscles in the walls of the lymphatic trunk. Lymphatic trunks, they are larger in size and they contain smooth muscles. So those smooth muscles, just like in the vasoconstriction and vasodilation, here these smooth muscles, they are circular and they may cause contraction, just like peristaltic movement in the small intestines, those circular muscles. So their rhythmic contraction of the smooth muscles, they also pump the surrounding lymphatic vessels that are running uh, within the vessel. So because this is in the wall of the lymphatic ducts, so lymphatic trunks contain smooth muscles. So when it contracts, it makes the peristaltic movement to carry the lymph. Contraction of the surrounding skeletal muscle. These skeletal muscle, because this is more appropriate for the deep group of vessels and deep group of lymphatic group lymph nodes. So when the lymphatic vessels, they are running between the muscles and the muscles contract, they compress, because between the muscles these vessels are running. So when the muscles contract and become broad in the middle, they compress the vessels and push the liquid component inside the vessel to go up and down. Then another mechanism is pulsation of the nearby arteries squeeze the lymphatic. So these vessels, arteries, they are also running in the pulse formation. The pulse, you can see, you can observe that it runs. And so what structure is near those pulse, they are also pushed up by these pulsation. Another mechanism is changes in the thoracic pressure in respiration. You know, the principle of respiration is the lung, the intrapleural pressure, negative intrapleural pressure and positive intrapleural pressure. In the negative intrapleural pressure, it makes the environment vacuum, so there is more capability of sucking the air in. So air automatically is sucked in by the expansion of the thorax, because that expansion creates a negative pressure inside the thoracic region. So from the openings in the thorax, wherever the opening would be there, whether oral air opening, trachea, or the aorta even going to the abdomen, so through those openings, air or any material, they are easily come into the thorax. So that's why this negative intrathoracic pressure at the time of inspiration, it causes the lymphatic vessels, lymph to go into the thoracic region, ascends up. Another important is the presence of valves. This valve is very important, and they are very numerous, which prevents the backward flow of the lymph. So what has ascend up, those lymph cannot go down again. Similarly, exercises significantly increases the lymphatic return, because in exercises we are very active and muscles are actively contracting and relaxing, so it is all pumping, blood is running very fast, pulse is very high, so everything helps in pushing the lymph in the vessels to go towards the venous, the hard part. Any condition that interferes with the flow of lymph will result in the edema. Okay, coming to the next slide, lymphatic organs. Now coming to the organs, so lymphatic organs can be classified as primary and secondary. Primary lymphatic organs, also called as central lymphoid organ, it is where the immature lymphocytes develop and mature. They include thymus and bone marrow. These two, thymus and bone marrow, you know, the T and B lymphocytes, they are usually they mature in the early life in these two structures. Thymus, T cells, bone marrow, B cells usually. Which bone marrow? Red bone marrow. They are active bone marrow in the children. So these two organs, they make the B and T lymphocytes mature in the childhood. Second, secondary lymphatic organs and tissue, where the mature B and T lymphocytes, they accumulate in the tissue. So those tissue or those organs, they are called as the secondary lymphatic organs. So where the antigen is exposed to mature lymphocytes, they include. So the mature lymphocytes, they settle in these lymph nodes, spleen, lymph nodules. So these structures, they are called as secondary lymphatic organs, where the mature lymphocytes, they accumulate inside. The lymphoid organs have well-defined anatomical sites. So lymphoid organs, so organs that contain the mature lymphocytes, they are not circulating, but they are settled down in the organs. These are composed of lymphatic tissue surrounded by connective tissue called capsules. Example, lymph nodes, spleen, thymus, they are all lymphoid organs or lymph organs. Thymus as the primary, because thymus and the red bone marrow, those are the primary lymphoid tissue. So we'll discuss first the thymus. Thymus is present at the highest part of the thorax, so anterior to the heart in the anterior mediastinum. There is a thymus, this yellow color small structure. So membrane of endocrine, lymphatic and immune system, is a member of endocrine, lymphatic and immune system. Then lymphoid organ that does not filter blood or tissue. The thymus is bilobed organ located between sternum and the aortic arch. These are all anatomy things you have to memorize. Covered by a fibrous capsule that gives off septa that divides the gland into several lobules. Lobes have several lobes. Lobes have cortex and medulla populated by T lymphocytes responsible for cell-mediated immune response. Thymus, as I told you earlier, that is usually involved in the maturation of the T cells. So in the thymus, you will find more T lymphocytes, mature one. Atrophies after puberty. This thymus at the time of puberty, it is just maximum, but after puberty, it sharply decline and become atrophic. So after puberty, it is atrophic. Lymphoid tissue is in the form of diffuse aggregated lymphocytes. So they are different aggregation. Aggregation means collection. So they are collected form. T cells, they are in the collected form in different parts of this organ. It has no lymph nodes, no lymph nodules, not lymph nodes, and no afferent lymphatics, but efferent lymphatics are present. So here one feature of the thymus is that it contains no lymph nodules and no afferent lymphatics, but efferent lymphatics, they are present just to send the mature T lymphocytes. It secretes hormones thymosin and thymopoietin, which regulates the maturation of T lymphocytes. So which hormone involved in the maturation of T lymphocytes? Thymosin. Thymosin. Now come to the second. This is the secondary lymphoid organ. Another example of the lymphoid organ, the secondary one. One of the example of the secondary lymphoid organ, spleen. The largest lymphatic organ located in the upper left hypochondriac region between the fundus of the stomach and the diaphragm, between 9th to 11th rib, in line of 10th rib. So this is the 10th rib. So along the 10th rib, between 9th and 10th rib, in line of the 10th rib. So 10 is the middle one here. So mainly it is on the 10th one, right? But it can go and cover above to the 9th and below to the 11th. Then features of the spleen, surfaces and borders. Diaphragmatic surface. If you see this surface, this smooth surface, that is the actually posterior surface. So this is the anterior surface, what we are looking here. The posterior surface of this one, because this is the lateral view and this is the diaphragm. So this diaphragm is actually touching the spleen. So this posterior surface of the spleen, this is the stomach momentum. So posterior surface of the spleen, that is touching the diaphragm, that is called the diaphragmatic surface or the posterior surface. Visceral surface. Viscera mean organ. The anterior surface is called as the visceral surface because there are organs that are making impression on the anterior surface. Just like this impression, this depression, this area is called colic impression. So this colic impression is actually impression due to the colic flexure, left colic flexure. This one is actually gastric impression. So gastric impression, stomach. So stomach is here, and this impression is called the renal impression because kidney is here. So this location, gastric impression on the upper side. So there is the gastric impression. Lower is the colon here. So there is the colon impression, and more medially we have got the kidney there. Then we have got the superior border, splenic notch. Now this is one border, superior, and this is the inferior border. On the superior border, the identification point is that none along the border there is a depression. Here is the notch depression. There are two notch here. So this is called the notched border. Anterior border is also called as notched border. So this notching is only present in the superior border. So this is also called as splenic notch. Then we have got the inferior border. So this inferior border is very big one. So this is called as the inferior border as it is mentioned here. Then we have got anterior extremity and posterior extremity. Anterior extremity is anterior. So this anterior extremity. So this area, this is the extreme. There is the anterior extreme and there is the posterior extreme. So this apex, there is the posterior extreme, and there is the base, there is the anterior. So this is the inferior border, and there is the anterior extremity. Hilum we have discussed several times. Any solid organ, just like lung, liver, kidney, spleen, all of them, they have got one specialized area where all the vessels, arteries, veins, nerves, lymphatics, ducts, they can go inside the organ and they can get out of that organ. So that specific area is called as the hilum. So here in the spleen, if you see this area, the central part, this is called as the hilum, and this part is present on which surface? Anterior surface, because the posterior surface is smooth and runs along with the diaphragm. So anterior surface contain the hilum of the. Now come to the spleen internal structure. This is a cut section of the spleen showing two different color, red, blue, and there is third color that is called the white. So this white is called white pulp, and apart from white pulp, this surrounding area, they are all called as the red pulp, because in the red pulp you will find the red and blue both. Red because RBCs are there, white why? Because WBC are there. Okay, tissue inside the spleen are divided into a red pulp having sinuses filled with red vessels. Sinuses means cavities, so these are the sinuses here. So this vein, they ultimately drain into the sinuses, and so venous sinuses, this one, all this blue color, this is the venous sinuses that contains the red blood cells. White pulp, the white color is white pulp. Lymphatic tissue, mostly lymphocytes, macrophages around. So this artery, one important thing is that the artery passes through this white area, not the veins. So the center in the cut section of this white part, the central part of this white pulp, it contains arteries, right? And the portion in the red part, you will find the veins. This is very important. So small branches of the splenic artery called central artery. So this central artery, these are the arteries running in the functions of the spleen: production of the red blood cells in the fetus, cleans and filters blood by removal of bacteria and worn out damaged. Definitely, this is a lymphoid, so they will engulf and destroy the bacteria and the old WBC, old RBCs, old platelets. Blood reservoir stores, because you have seen the sinuses, venous sinuses, so this spleen also contains a lot of blood inside, so it also stores and releases blood in time of demand, such as hemorrhages. So in blood loss is going on, so this spleen contract and releases its stored blood amount into the circulation. Function of the immunity as a site of B cell proliferation into the plasma cells. Does not filter lymph because it has no afferent lymphatic vessels. Efferent lymphatic vessels leave the spleen or lymph sinuses. So afferent is also not present here. Aggregates of the lymphatic tissues. Aggregates means collection. So collection of the lymphatic tissue. So where the T lymphocytes and the B lymphocytes, they collected at one place, that aggregation, that is called as the lymph nodule. Nodule is smaller than the node. Lymph node, you have discussed with the lymphatic vessels. Lymph node, they are big structures, but the microscopic structures of the aggregation of T and B lymphocytes, because in the lymph node, again inside, what is the population? B and T lymphocytes. Similarly here, nodules, they are very small aggregation, microscopic part. They are not nodule, big size, they are nodules. Sometimes they are also called as follicles. So follicles and nodules are same, but follicles and node are not same. Follicles are nodules, smaller. So nodule and follicles, they are very important. They are isolated clusters of lymphocytes and macrophages. Some with some extracellular matrix they are. So can you see here, this is the cut section of the wall of the small intestine. This is the mucosa part and there is the submucosa. In between, this is the aggregation of B and T lymphocytes. So this B and T aggregation means collection. This is microscopic and they are called nodules. So they are called lymphoid nodules. So lymphoid nodule or lymphoid follicle. This is the mucous membrane. So mucous membrane, the mucosa here. It is not surrounded by any capsule. It is not surrounded by any capsule. There is no capsule. They are uncapsulated. Uncapsulated means non-capsulated. Much smaller than the lymph nodes. Not located along the lymphatic vessels. So do not act as lymph filters. Since they are not attached with the vascular lymphatic system, so they don't contain the lymph. They don't act like that. So lymph nodules are a constant feature of lymph nodes. Inside the lymph nodes, you will find the population of T and B lymphocytes. They are very big one, right? but they are capsulated. So nodule is actually capsulated, and if you remove the capsule and make a small amount in the mucosa of the small intestine, those small amount of aggregated T and B lymphocytes, they are called as nodules. So what is the constant feature where you can find the nodules? Inside the lymph nodes, tonsils of the oral cavity, appendix. So this is the cut section of the appendix showing some lymphoid follicle. So lymphoid follicle, again you will find two parts, germinal part and the cortical part. T, B in the center. Lymphatic tissues, again we come to the another lymphatic tissue is composed of is the pairs patches, right? Now lymphatic tissue that are aggregated lymphocytes, B and T lymphocytes. So cells, lymphocytes, B cells and T cells supporting framework of reticular connectivity. When we talk about the nodule and we say that the nodules, they are non-capsulated, there is no capsule around the nodules. Lymph node is capsulated inside, again B and T lymphocyte, but it is capsulated a big structure. But a smaller structure without capsule containing B and lymphocyte, T and T lymphocytes, they are called nodules, and those are supported by the reticular connective tissue. Reticular connective tissue containing the reticular fibers. Now these aggregation, they are below the epithelium, and in the small intestine they are particularly or anywhere in the body, whether in the lungs, in the digestive system, in the urinary system, other system, respiratory, reproductive system. These aggregation of T lymphocytes below the epithelium and inside the mucosa, they are called mucosa associated lymphatic tissue, MALT. MALT, mucosa associated lymphatic tissue. What are the examples where you can find MALT? So MALT tissue is also present in the respiratory, digestive, urinary and reproductive. In the digestive, this is the cut section of the small intestinal part with these villi you can see, and at the base here inside the mucosa you will find aggregation of T and B lymphocytes, and this aggregation is the nodule. So this pairs for the scientists. So this patch where this aggregation is there is called pairs patch, name of the scientist, on the name of the scientist, and this is one of the example of the MALT, mucosa associated. So this is the mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. So there is a lymphoid tissue, lymphoid aggregation, and there is the pairs patches on the scientist name, and this is one of the example of the MALT. Then we have got lacteals. Lacteals I have named earlier. Lacteals is the capillary name that are present in the small intestine. The intestinal, you have studied intestinal trunk. So from the intestine, the small intestine, the vessels with the capillaries of the vascular system, lacteals are specialized lymphatic capillaries in the villi of the small intestine. This is one villi, and in the center of the villi, this red color, sorry, this green color structure. So this green color is the lymphatic vessel. So this vessel has got capillary end. It is blind ended, right? It is not connect to anyone else. Here the artery and veins are there, but the purpose of this capillary inside the venous is to absorb or collect the lymph, particularly the lymph, the interstitial fluid that contains the fats. So fatty acids that are present in the interstitium of the lymph of the villi, that fatty acid is sucked in into the lacteals. So this lacteal is very important in the suction of the fatty acids from the digestive system. So in the digestive system, all the fats, they are absorbed usually by this lacteal system. The lymph vessels, vascular system, it goes just like the veins, it goes to the liver, and from the liver it goes to the vena cava, inferior vena cava. So lacteals are a specialized lymphatic tissue. These are the sites of lipid absorption, bringing lipids from the digestive system back to the blood. Thank you very much. Hopefully, inshallah, it become long, but it will be very helpful. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.